Could everybody make their way to their seats, please? Hello, everybody. Please sit down. Can everybody sit down and be quiet, please, so we get started? Tom Beatty, will you get away from the bar and get to your seat? I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the 60th anniversary celebration of the New York State Conservative Party. I'd like to thank everyone in attendance tonight. Thank you for taking your time and your contribution to be here. I'd also like to thank all of our dinner sponsors and those that took ads in our dinner journal. I'd also like to say thank you very much to Chairman Jerry Kassar, Executive Director Sean Marie Levine, we'll take that as a thank you to Sean Marie, and then also our Office Manager Eileen Johnson, who has done a tremendous job on this event, and all the rest of the team that put this event together tonight in this beautiful venue. I was asked to introduce our Master of Ceremonies tonight, Jim Kerr, a man well known to most of you. I had introduced Jim last year at our fall reception. As you know, Jim is a registered conservative, and he has served for at least 20 years on our state executive committee. But since I've been asked to do this again tonight, this introduction, I thought it'd be kind of boring. So I decided to do a little investigation about Jim, and I came up with some interesting things from his friends and colleagues. Let me tell you, we're going to have a little bit of a different introduction tonight than we had last year. Lots of things here. I like to say that Jerry Kassar is responsible for this irresponsibility of judgment in allowing me to do this to Jim. So for those of you, I'd like to say, for whatever Jim has frustrations about tonight, it's all Jerry's fault. So let me start. No, it's not going to be a different introduction, because there are two overarching things and accomplishments in Jim Kerr's life that need to be told about Jim. Those things have not changed. Number one, the accomplishment that most people know about Jim Kerr and his extraordinary lifelong commitment to excellence in his trade as a radio host and online radio personality. Jim has been a continuous on-air radio personality since the age of 21. He's a little longer than that now. And he is the longest-serving radio on-air personality in New York City history. Jim has been recognized by his professional peers for his lifetime excellence in 2018 when he was inducted into the American Radio Hall of Fame. Today, Jim continues to serve as an on-air radio host at WAXQ 104.3 in New York City. The second thing, though, and the most important accomplishment that I think everyone needs to understand about Jim And that which I am most proud to tell you about is what defines Jim and his lifelong commitment to helping the physically and intellectually disabled people here in the greater New York City area, which he has done through the Heart Shares Human Services of New York. Heart Shares helps thousands of people daily who face challenges that those of us in this room cannot fully ever understand that they are going through. Jim does this selflessly, and he has served on the board of directors of Heart Shares for over 35 years. Heart Shares has an annual budget of over $100 million, and Jim is a very important part of that in raising money and directing that organization that helps those people on a daily basis. Jim has made a difference in the lives of so many who are far less fortunate than all of us here, and I think that that is probably going to be something that is his greatest accomplishment in life. We will remember Jim for his radio abilities and his excellence and commitment, that all of us should be proud of that commitment to one's profession. But again, his greatest accomplishments are always going to be what he has done for those people who are intellectually and physically disabled here in New York City, and most of those people will never know the millions and millions of dollars that Jim has raised to help those children and those people who are in need. Please give a warm welcome to fellow conservative and great friend of the New York State Conservative Party, tonight's Master of Ceremonies, Jim Kerr.
Thank you, Chairman Kendall. Thank you very much for those very, very kind words. So many of you are friends that I've known for years and years and years. I want to thank you for your continued commitment to the New York State Conservative Party and welcome you to our fall reception for 2022. Let's get things right underway by welcoming to the podium our good friend from Holy Rosary Parish on Staten Island for our invocation. Would you welcome, please, Father Michael Martini.
Let us pray. Almighty Father, we thank you for our nation. We feel such gratitude to be able to live here, and it is a wonderful stewardship you have given to always be faithful to it. We thank you, Father, for freedom. We believe that our rights have been endowed to us by you, our Creator. We celebrate human freedom because we know that you celebrate human freedom. Give us always the strength that we need to protect them. For as Ronald Reagan told us, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We thank you for life. We pray that America will always stand for life. You said to the nation of Israel, before they inherited the land that you were going to give them, I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. So choose life in order that you may live. We pray that America will always choose to protect life at all stages. We thank you for our men and women who lay down their lives for us every day as they serve our country in the military. Father, protect them, their husbands and wives and their children. We pray that you would deliver our enemies into their hands in a merciful way. We pray that every cause for which they fight will be a just cause. Let them be blessed and fulfilled in their service. We thank you and pray for the New York State Conservative Party on this its 60th anniversary. May we be strengthened by your grace to always profess our highest ideals as Americans. May the Lord bless this gathering, our food, and our work. May he remind us to draw strength, courage, and direction from the words President Abraham Lincoln so eloquently spoke in his second inaugural address when he said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with the firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Almighty Father, we ask these things as we ask all things, in thy most holy and gracious name. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing and welcome Alexis Cole from the band that is here entertaining us this evening, the Kiami Trio. Alexis Cole will sing the national anthem. And as Alexis makes her way to the podium, I would also like to point out that she's a veteran staff sergeant, United States Army, and we welcome you, Alexis Cole.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early lights what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you so much. With all due respect to Jose Feliciano, who in 1968 performed the national anthem at the World Series as the Detroit Tigers took on the St. Louis Cardinals. With all due respect to Jose Feliciano, he started a trend, and it was really nice to hear a traditional rendition of our national anthem here tonight. Would you please welcome Steve Gallagher from Wayne County Conservative Party. He will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, born and unborn.
Steve, that's a great tie. Looking very, very, very sharp. Well, welcome. You can sit down now. It's great to be in New Rochelle, where when I was a little boy, Steve and Laura Petrie lived. I know that to be true because I saw it on television. And we are on the island right now where the great Glenn Miller, who perished in World War II, first performed his classic String of Pearls in the 1930s. Right here, where we are right now. It's a beautiful venue, our second fall reception here. But there's a difference between this year and last year. There's just something a little different in the air. It's brisk. We have that feeling of autumn. It's actually going to go down into the 40s tonight. It's kind of invigorating, the cool air. But there's something besides the change in season that I experience when I'm walking around these days. I feel a change in the feelings inside the hearts of New Yorkers that will benefit our candidates and the state of New York as the November election approaches. You see, I live in Manhattan, and most of my friends, most of the people that I know are Democrats, many of them quite liberal Democrats. That would also be true of my colleagues. I'm used to being taunted and teased and, somewhat semi-good-naturedly harassed by my friends and colleagues because I'm a conservative. But I've noticed something very, very different of late. Many of my Democratic friends are taking me aside and saying, I'm really thinking about voting for Lee Zeldin. Now, that may be because of something that we were very disappointed in that may have turned out to actually work to our advantage. It was disappointing when we lost the New York State Senate to the Democrats. That gave them complete control in Albany with the executive chamber and the assembly and the state Senate. We were very upset by that. But guess what happened when the Democrats had complete power in Albany? They had an opportunity to actually take the policies they had been espousing and turn them into reality. And guess what? As those policies became reality, we've discovered most people don't like them. This bodes well for us this year. I really feel like we have a very, very, very good chance to prevail, regardless of what the polls say, and I know that what I'm telling you now is totally anecdotal, but I hadn't heard these sorts of things before, but I'm hearing them now, and I'm hearing them every single day. By the way, I'd like to thank our dinner chairman, Chris Kendall, for the amazing and unexpected introduction. Thank you so much. He, of course, is regional vice chairman and also chairman of the Madison County Party. Our journal chairman, Jim Thomas, state vice chairman, did a really great job. And the band that has been performing for us this evening, the Kiami Trio, we met just a moment ago Alexis Cole, the singer and pianist, but Steve Lamatina is the guitarist, and Lou Stellutti is on upright bass. And they are playing their wonderful music for us for free. And we thank them so much for that. We have, I notice, in our group this evening, a few people that we would like to acknowledge. First, the very wonderful Julie Killian, who was our lieutenant gubernatorial candidate last time around. Hi, Julie. She is here. Representing the state assembly minority is Chris Tague. Chris. And John Turco is here representing Senate Republicans this evening, and representing the state Republican Party is John Haggerty. And of course, we are joined tonight by our state chairman, Jerry Kassar.
Thanks, Jim. Jim mentioned earlier on he doesn't want to believe the polls because he doesn't believe in polls, but here's the problem. The polls actually say we're going to win. So let me just say this to you. I want to talk a little bit about the history of the party, but let me say this to you. We are about to make history. public polls, private polls, man on the street, people in this room, we all know that we're going to win. Frankly speaking, some of it's for the wrong reasons. We're going to win because the state is so fouled up. People sometimes refer to the governor as a bozo, and I think that's probably a compliment. But that's for another maybe part of this program. We have most of our statewide ticket here, and they're all going to say a few words. Lee is not here, and I'm going to be very straight with you. I told him if I saw him here, I would throw him out. You are the last group of people he needs to see. I do want to thank Chris. I do want to thank Eileen Johnson. I do want to thank Jim Thomas. I do want to, of course, thank Sean Marie for this successful event, but more importantly, for all the things they do for the party all the time. And there are more than those names. I want to acknowledge and request that anyone who's in this room who is playing an active part in the Conservative Party, as a state committee member, as an activist in a club, as a county chairperson, stand up and take a bow. Stand up. Stand up, all of you. That whole table. Everybody that's doing their part for the Conservative Party, stand up and take a bow. You see 12, 13, 14 lawn signs in the back for Zeldin? Well, here's my problem. I don't have a single one left, and I bought 4,000. That's because of them. They're on the lawns. I hope they're on the lawns. I hope they're in the yards, but I don't have any left, and I know from wherever I go that we see our efforts, and our efforts are increasing. The party's efforts are increasing. I don't expect to get 130,000 votes, which is what the law requires. I don't expect to get 225,000 votes, which makes it a good year. I don't expect to get 275,000 votes so everybody can say, Jerry, you did a good job. I expect to get the number of votes to make the difference in a Zeldin victory. Now, we are 60 years old. We were founded by, and going strong, frankly, we were founded by J. Daniel Mahoney and his brother-in-law, Kieran O'Doherty. And they basically had an idea. And they had an idea that was really required at the time, 1962, because there were no conservative forces in this state that were organized. There was the Liberal Democratic Party, and there was the Liberal Republican Party, and then there was the Liberal Party. That's what New York State was about, yet the people of the state did not agree with that philosophy, and there was a new movement coming about, a modern conservative movement. Groups like Young Americans for Freedom and the Buckleys and the Sharon Statement. People like Barry Goldwater. People like Ronald Reagan. Individuals that put this movement together, and they needed a beachhead in what was the biggest state in the country, one of the financial center of the country, the media center of the country. They needed a beachhead in New York State, and the Mahoneys formed the Conservative Party, and the National Conservative Movement had a beachhead in the United States that they grew out of to become a national movement and fight back with Goldwater, fight back with Bill Buckley, then fight back with Jim Buckley, and ultimately with us in 1976, supporting Ronald Reagan. We were glad that others joined us in 1980. We were glad because it is about putting our people into office. So Dan Mahoney had plenty of help. He had help from people in 62 counties in the state, because that's how you organize a political party in the state. You got to go everywhere, and it is labor intensive. He also had the support of this growing national movement of conservatives. But even in New York State, I should say, including New York State, there was intellectuals like Professor Rice. Remarkably, and we name an award after him, there was Charles Edison, Thomas Edison's son, former governor of New Jersey, and Franklin Roosevelt, Secretary of the Navy. He came over believing that New York needed the conservative movement, and until his passing in the mid-1960s, was involved as a senior statesman within the Conservative Party. Thomas Edison's son. People don't realize that, but I'm letting you know. Maybe, just maybe, I am saying a dirty word when I say this name, but I'm going to tell you, I had met him a number of times, and I know the role he played. Roy Cohn was an early member and activist with the Conservative Party, and for all the negativity that the left wing wants to describe him, we must never forget that communism was advancing, and people like Roy Cohn and the conservative movement stopped it. Well, the party grew. The party grew, I don't want to say in leaps and bounds, but you had a leap one year, a bound the next. But we moved ahead. Our enrollment increased. Our election victories increased. Eventually, the Rockefellers, through our efforts, began to fade from the scene, or partially through our efforts. I'm going to take full credit for that. But I will say that our type of Republican and conservative, like the Buckleys and so many other local officials around the state, began to take hold, and the state began to move in a different direction. Now, during this period, we had our bumps and we had our bruises, but we always maintained our steadfast movement forward and a real respect. The people in our party are people of beliefs and philosophy. When you hear them speak or you attend one of the meetings, you may sometimes say, well, you know why? I hope nobody takes a swing at me. But you do know that these are individuals that are committed and dedicated, and when they talk about their children, or when they talk about their families, or when they talk about taxes, or when they talk about their government, or when they talk about integrity, you know where they're coming from, and you know you should listen to them. Many of those people are in this room. So let me just say this. The party has had only a handful of state chairmen, frankly. There was actually Kieran O'Doherty for about 6 months. Then there was J. Daniel Mahoney for a number of years. J. Daniel Mahoney eventually became a federal court of appeals judge in the 1980s. Significant national jurist. There was, of course, Surf Maltese, who is not as much remembered as being the chairman, but he spent many, many years as the executive director. And, of course, Surf became a state senator. And then there was Mike Long. We have a 60-year history, and Mike was the chairman for 30 years. Understand that. Understand what I'm telling you. Half the history of the Conservative Party has Mike Long's stamp on it. And that's the state party history. He became the Brooklyn chairman in 1972. So basically, there's something like only 12 or 13 years of the entire party history where Mike Long was not playing a significant role. Now, Mike was a mentor to many. He was a mentor to me. I can look around this room. I know the number of people he was a mentor to. And I don't know anyone who would say that they have even a moment criticism of his mentoring or what they learned from him. I will tell you we had some of our greatest victories under him. I will tell you the party kept on growing and growing and growing. We had an effect on government. There might be some people in this room who thought that we might have retreated from the field at one time or another, but we didn't. What we ended up doing was we were actually on the battlefield. Teddy Roosevelt talked about people in the arena. Mike Long put us in the arena, and there were a lot of people on the sidelines just watching, and they really, I believe, understood the power that he was presenting through this Conservative Party. And one of the reasons that's the case is because the man was of enormous beliefs, philosophy. He always came across as caring, understanding, listening, and I know he was. But I also know he wasn't going to give in. I wish I could say I was always like that, but I will say that I did learn from him. And I will say that his loss was immeasurable to the party and to me. But that's the role of Mike Long in any 60-year history we talk about concerning this party. Now, our honorees are actually an extension of our history. Larry Kudlow, who I'm going to bring up in a moment, has played an enormous role with both the conservative movement and really with the I've met Larry going back to dinners he spoke at the Armory that Howard Lim used to throw his events at in Midtown Manhattan. Lots of years. Larry Kudlow, remarkable individual, has been important to this party. Our Ronald Reagan Award winner, who I will bring up after Larry, John Gizzi, Newsmax White House correspondent, among 100 things, has been close and a friend to this party for more years than anyone can count. So let me say a few words about Larry Kudlow and bring him forward. I know you have. I know we are so fortunate to have him. He came right over here from his Fox TV show, and that is appreciated. He took the time. So who is Larry Kudlow? If you want to know, I'll tell you, because you probably already know what I'm going to say. He was, during the President Reagan's first term, the Associate Director for Economics and Planning at the Office of Management and Budget for Ronald Reagan's first term. During President Trump's term, Larry Kudlow was Assistant to the President for Economic Policy and the Director of the National Economic Council. Kind of some bookends on a career, but in between, I mean, Mr. Kudlow, Larry Kudlow, has been a nationally syndicated columnist. He was the senior editor of National Review and a columnist. He's an author of several books. He, of course, currently has his show Kudlow, which airs at 4 p.m. on weekdays on Fox Business. He has served as a trustee of Fordham University, and if he didn't have enough to do, he was president of his local parish council. And frankly, that probably takes up more time than any of the other stuff. Larry Kudlow is the recipient of numerous awards, from the Bishop's Humanitarian Award in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens, to the NYPD Holy Name Society's Lifetime Achievement Award, among many, many awards. With that, I would like to bring forward Larry Kudlow.
It was a beautiful invocation. No, that's just a parenthetical. And was it Staff Sergeant? I want to get it right because it was a beautiful rendition. Appreciate that very much, if I got that right. And a couple of things. I just want to say at the beginning, echoing some of what Jerry said, one of the reasons that I'm delighted and honored to be here today is to commemorate my very dear, long-term late friend, Mike Long, who was a great friend to me. And you're absolutely right, he was constitutionally incapable of bending any of his principles, which is a wonderful thing. But he would call me and ask me to speak hither and yon. Big hither and yon. But I went. And I was always, I don't know, I was always afraid either not to say yes or to say up. And I basically love the guy. Nobody ever heard of me and gave me tremendous opportunities. And so I'm grateful for that. And his legacy is very, very important. In my time, which is now a rather long time, I've had the blessing of working for Ronald Reagan and William F. Buckley and Donald Trump. And I do the best I can to promote conservative principles. I have a long history with this New York Conservative Party, and it's a wonderful history, and I'm glad you're alive and well. And I will say this evening what I say every night on the TV show: the cavalry's coming. The cavalry's coming. And I might add, here in New York State, part of that cavalry is my good friend Lee Zeldin, who's going to I will also say that the cavalry is coming because we've had this lovely experiment in woke, progressivism, Green New Deal, climate change, critical race theory, which I choose to summarize in the words of another good pal of mine, Newt Gingrich. It's never worked in the past. It's not. And we have to go through these periods every now and then. To the American voting population that totalitarian and authoritarian and income redistributions and high taxes and high regulations and ending energy independence and open borders and crazy critical race theory in schools, this stuff doesn't work. It was never meant to work. I don't know what it was meant to do, but the moment Joe Biden started spewing this stuff out, it was sort of clear to me, oh my gosh, here we go again, and it's not worked. And then I say, well, okay, we will outlast you. Our conservative principles based on freedom and free market capitalism, we will outlast you, as we've outlasted so many of these fakers in the past. The trouble with the story is there is a cost. There is a cost. So here's this guy Biden. What was he? Sunday he was in Oregon, the People's Republic of Oregon. Where was he? Portland? Huh? Oregon. I think he was in Portland. That was the Portland, which was run as a Soviet-style council for about a year and a half, when they were firebombing the federal buildings and clogging up downtown. Fantastic story. Defund the police, defund everything. So he's in Portland, and he's licking this ice cream cone, and he's telling everybody how great the economy is. What a way to finish a campaign, you know? I mean, look, I'm a respectful person. He is the only president we have. I've served in the Oval a couple times myself, but gee whiz, there has to be a better way, and there has to be a better person, and there has to be a better party, and that's why I say the cavalry is coming. Look, it's, in my experience, it's not easy to take a roaring economy with no inflation, and in a mere 12 or 15 months, turn it into a high inflation economic recession. In 12 or 15 months. This is textbook stuff. And yet, that's what we've done. And it is taking a toll, and people are suffering. And, you know, after-tax income, as Reagan used to call it, is falling, and real wages are falling. And grocery prices are rising, and even lately we've had to endure insults from OPEC in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. This is when I came in. I was a child in the 1970s, and I remember the Arab oil embargo. And here we are back again 50-some-odd years later. It's hard to believe, but that's the position we're in. a catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan with absolutely no honor to our wonderful, fabulous military troops, which we did not take care of, which is being underfunded right now. And then the ongoing problems, which has also become a national catastrophe and embarrassment, that we don't any longer believe in national sovereignty on our borders, which is not something we can accept as Americans. And the drug cartels and the fentanyl and the lawlessness that has taken over, and it has become a national issue. I kind of like this Governor DeSantis sends a plane load of 40 people to Martha's Vineyard. But I know Ron DeSantis. So he sends a plane load, whatever, 40, 45 people to Martha's Vineyard. And the Justice Department is suing them. Now, Biden is, whatever, pardon the phrase, Department of Homeland Security, Mayorkas. They've been sending thousands of people, illegals, all across the country, including here, including this airport just around the corner where I think I am. There's an airport nearby, isn't there? I'm sure there is. And they don't tell anybody, but they're suing DeSantis because he parked 45 people in Martha's Vineyard, whereupon the whole place went crazy, called in the National Guard, and shipped them over to Cape Cod in 20 minutes. You can't make this stuff up. It will redound to our benefit, but it is taking a toll. I don't like lawlessness. Nor do I like... I don't like spiking inflation. I don't like deep recessions. I don't like people losing their jobs. I don't like record federal spending, which is the root cause of this inflation. I don't like an independent Federal Reserve, which played along with the Biden White House every step of the way in denying inflation and their money printing. I started at the Federal Reserve. It's a little-known factoid in the deep, dark past. I was actually Paul Volcker's assistant when he was running the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in the early mid-'70s. And what I see with the Fed giving up its independence is really most regrettable. And we will suffer through many, many more months of high inflation because of these policies, which are taking their toll, on interest rates, for example, where the housing market is in virtual collapse. None of this is good. None of this is good. The trick is here to do what I think I'm seeing in my friends in Washington, in the House, more the House than the Senate, but the House. I had Kevin McCarthy on again last night on the show, and he's a good friend. He would come and visit us late in the afternoon sometimes in the little dining room behind the Oval Office where President Trump would like to hold court with Diet Cokes and Hershey bars. And I'd get a call from the outer Oval, and I'd go out and bring him in, and by the hand, bring him in, sit him down. Trump loved him. And they have created this commitment to America, which was modeled after Newt Gingrich's contract with America 25 years ago. And it's hitting all the high spots. And I am encouraging him to start a group. Maybe I'll help him out if I can. We will take the House. We will take the Senate. But we will inherit an economic crisis. And it will be blamed on Republicans, but it won't be other Republicans making. But it is very important here, and I make this substantive point, it is very important that when the Republicans take power on January 3rd, they are ready with a new plan to restore prosperity to America. I saw my old and dear friend Leah, who's around here someplace, working for Jack Kemp. There she is, sweetheart. I was a great friend of Jack Kemp's. I worked for Reagan and worked for, pardon the phrase, David Stockman in those days, who was good for the first 10 or 11 months. But it was Stockman and Kemp who put together a wonderful memo in the Wall Street Journal showing how Republicans must avoid an economic Dunkirk. And we need that exact same memo today, so they will hit the ground running, and they will rescind the multi-trillion-dollar excess spending. They will rescind the 87,000 IRS agents. They will rescind the overregulations, and they will reopen the oil and gas spigots so we don't have to rely on the Saudis and the Iranians and the Venezuelans. They will probably, in so doing, and they will use their appropriations authority, probably go in hand-to-hand combat with Joe Biden or whatever's left of him. But the country will be behind the new Republican majority. This is an important point, I think. The country will be behind the new Republican majority because the country doesn't like what it sees or what it's getting. So the sooner they act with great clarity and steadfastness, the better they'll do. The better they'll do. We will need to take the White House back in 2024, and I believe this will be a first step in taking the White House back in 2024. I don't want you to think I have any particular favorites in that. But I do talk to somebody on a frequent basis who was once my employer, who always ends every conversation essentially with two phrases. Larry, this is your favorite former president. And then he'll say, Larry, stay healthy. I will leave the rest up to your imaginations, your conservative imaginations. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. You're going to honor John and other men and women party leaders. It's a great pleasure to be here. But let me end where I began. I come to commemorate my dear late friend Mike Long, who was a very unusual human being. And he gave his blood and guts to this conservative party, which is a noble undertaking. So I'm Larry Kudlow. Thank you for having me.
Let me just say there are a number of candidates here. So Mike Lawler, I see a bunch of congressional candidates, state senate candidates, assembly candidates. Once again, thank you for doing what you're doing. Many of you are going to win this year. Maybe when you started the year you thought, well, I got a lot of things I want to do in life, but I wasn't actually looking to win. But you may, frankly, you may lose out. You might actually win simply because of the way the year is going. But we need you in office, and there will be more Congress members from this state, from our party, from the Republican and conservative parties. There will be more state senators, and there will be more assembly members. And that's not my guess. That's not my guess. That's not my rhetoric. That is what all the data, what all the conversations show. You don't have Lee winning a race without lots of people following behind. You see the Zeldin signs along the windows? They're supposed to leave here tonight. There aren't that many of them, but you're supposed to take them, put them on your lawns. So I would hope that you will do that. Don't worry about it being our last sign. We put 2 away. That's what we did at headquarters the other day. We put 2 away. We normally have hundreds of things laying around. We had 2 left, and I knew somebody wanted the 2, so I hid them in the closet. Right, that's what this year has become. So the party has several different important awards that we do not award annually. We award them when we find an individual fitting of the award. This year, we decided for the first time in a number of years to, because there was a worthy recipient, to award the Ronald Reagan Award for Journalism. Now, you think of Ronald Reagan as a president, obviously. You think of him as an actor, I suppose. You think of him as a great American, for sure. But never forget that what he was known for is being the great communicator. And that communications, his ability to speak and talk and change views, are really, in our view, was worthy of a special award. A special award. Could I have everybody's attention? Can I have everybody's attention? Thank you. We felt it was worthy of having a special award from the party that we established maybe, I guess, 16 or 18 years ago. Given it out like 4 or 5 times. We have a winner this year and a recipient this year, perfect recipient, actually someone who should have received this award years ago. But you know what happens? Those that are closest to you are the first ones you forget about when you're giving out awards. And this honoree, John Gizzi, is close to the Conservative Party. John, as many of you know, was at one time the editor of Human Events and a columnist with Human Events. I'm certain you read currently many of his reports as the Newsmax White House correspondent. I feel certain that you read his numerous columns and reporting. I mean, John. I'm not even sure how many postings he has a week, but he certainly feels like he has at least 1 or 2 a day that he's reporting on, which is not all about the White House, but often about just politics in this nation. He's constantly writing about New York State and our battles. John has many awards under his belt. In 2002, he was named the Journalist of the Year by the Conservative Political Action Conference, which would be the premier award, except for this one, frankly, in the conservative movement for individuals that are making a difference. But I want to tell you the truth. Of all the things I know about John Gizzi, the one that actually impresses me most is not any of those. It's the fact that he's on the board of directors of the Young America's Foundation National Journalism Center. The Young America's Foundation is the old Young Americans for Freedom. It's the Young America's Foundation. Last year we had Ron Robinson here, the retiring president. Young America's Foundation is the future of the conservative movement, and John Gizzi is the future of teaching young conservatives to be journalists. It is a great pleasure for me to award John Gizzi, the Conservative Party's Ronald Reagan Journalism Award.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you all for being here tonight. I guess after an award like that and an introduction like that, the next step for me is to die. But I don't think I'm going to do that. The fact is that there is so much to report coming out of New York State, so much history to be made, I think I'll stick around for a little while. After all, someone has to tell it as it is. And that's something that I think I've been doing for quite a few years in coming to the Empire State and watching the Conservative Party grow. You know, I look back and I realize coming to this point that we're at has been a most important development in the history of conservatism in this state. And I think for me, the most spiritually uplifting point is to see not only longtime friends like Jerry, former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth, Roger Levy and his wife Leah, and so many others, but to see so many new faces and so many young people here tonight. It reminds me of a story told to me by my old friend, the the late Governor Guy Hunt of Alabama. He was the first Republican governor of Alabama since Reconstruction, and a very unlikely leader. He was someone who never went to college. He was a primitive Baptist preacher and an Amway salesman, and he somehow became governor. He was giving a talk to the inmates at the prison at Maxwell Air Force Base, and he began his remarks by saying, "My fellow citizens." Well, there was a titter through the prison yard because, in the eyes of the law, the convicts weren't citizens. So he started again, "My fellow convicts," and they all laughed at that. So finally, looking out at the prison yard, Governor Hunt said, "I'm not sure what to call you, but I'm glad to see you're all here." And I'm glad to see you're all here tonight. You know, the Prague writer Franz Kafka once said, "When someone takes on the world, bet on the world." Well, the fact is that Dan Mahoney and Kieran O'Doherty did indeed take on the world. Jerry explained what New York was like 60 years ago, with liberal Democratic machines dominating the cities, Albany, Buffalo, and of course, New York, and the Republican Party under Nelson Rockefeller essentially putting a sign on the headquarters that said, "No conservatives need apply." Yes, Dan and Kieran and Bill and Jim Buckley took on the world. And guess what? They won. And you won. I just look at the time I've been covering New York State and seen the changes. Even before I started to come here, we saw in 1970 that the conservatives elected the last person who became a U.S. Senator on a third-party ticket, Jim Buckley, and someone I just saw recently, and I can say he's going strong at 99 years old. And of course, the governorship, 3 straight times, was won with the votes of the Conservative Party ticket. You elected my friend, the late William Carney, as the congressman who was neither Democrat nor Republican, but Representative William Carney, conservative/Republican, New York. And today, the conservative line, row C, is the gold standard for any Republican who has a hope of being elected in November. Let's look at it. Since 1980, only 2 Republicans were ever elected to Congress from New York who didn't have the Conservative Party line. And of course, I will never forget, as long as I live, after the sad death of our friend Mike Long, when I interviewed former Governor Pataki, and he opened the interview by saying, "I never would have become governor without Mike Long." Well, you have an election coming up. No one knows what really is going to happen. And as Yogi Berra, that great philosopher, once said, never make predictions, especially about the future. But here's something I'm going to predict, that if the polls that were discussed earlier are in any way accurate, and Lee Zeldin is governor-elect, I can say that in his first interview, which I hope will be with Newsmax, he will say, "I could not have become governor without Jerry Kazar." We have some uncertain days ahead, but as the Peruvian poet Mario Vargas Llosa once said, "Uncertainty is a flower whose petals have yet to be picked." We will see what will happen in November. And of course, we know that whatever happens, we will have a day in court and a day at the polls. For as Cicero said, politics is not static. The good times do go away, but so do the bad times. That's something. Someone else writes the stuff, and being an old radio announcer, I repeat it and get the applause. Let me say tonight, it has been an honor and a privilege to receive this award. I cannot really find the words to say how it feels for me to have an award named after one of the great fathers of modern conservatism, Ronald Reagan, and to receive it through one of the great engines of modern conservatism, the New York Conservative Party. Let me leave you with the words of a man of words. His name was Nguyen Chi Thien. He was a Vietnamese poet and author. He was someone who used his mastery of language, his sense of sarcasm, and his knowledge to call down the communist regime that dominated his country for so long. For his troubles, Nguyen Chi Thien was sentenced to prison. He went to hard labor under the grueling sun of Southeast Asia. He was tortured to the limit of human endurance and even denied a pen and paper. But this man had a far more suitable device for committing verse, his memory. And when he was finally released from prison, he wrote down all the poems that he had sculpted in his mind and put them on 400 pieces of paper. And then he went to the British Embassy in Hanoi. He began to act in a weird way, overturning furniture, insulting guests. The sentries arrested him and brought him in. And what they discovered was that beneath his clothes and underclothing were those 400 pieces of paper, all with poetry on them. They knew what to do. They put it in a diplomatic pouch for safety, and they sent it to his publisher in London. And his words came out to the public in a book, Voices from Hell. Let me share with you one little poem written by this man from Vietnam. They exiled me to the heart of the jungle, thinking they would fertilize the manioc grass with my remains. But I became an expert hunter and came out filled with snake wisdom and rhino fierceness. They exiled me to the bottom of the ocean, thinking I would never rise from the depths. I became a deep-sea hunter, and I surfaced with many scintillating pearls. On October 2nd, 2012, Nguyen Chi Thien died. His words live on, as well as the memories and the voices from 27 years in prison. Let them inspire all of us. Let all of us today, as we pursue the goals of modern conservatism, always remember to have snake wisdom, rhino fierceness, and we know that when Election Day comes, we will emerge with many scintillating pearls. Thank you, and God bless you all. I accept the nomination.
Well, John, you spoke about being a radio announcer, speaking words that somebody else wrote and basking in the applause. Well, I'm a radio announcer. And let me make an announcement right now that I had absolutely nothing to do with, but that I'm sure will elicit some enthusiasm and applause. The Yankees won 5-1. Now we have some members of our statewide ticket who are here with us this evening that I would like to have an opportunity to introduce to you. First, and I was so blown away the first time I heard this gentleman speak. He is a dynamic speaker. He is just an incredible candidate for our parties and is a man of great bravery taking on the majority leader of the United States Senate. It's a tough job. He stepped up, and he's here with us tonight. Would you please welcome Joe Pinion.
Well, no one loves to follow John Gizzy. I knew it well how it could be a problem. John and I are former colleagues. I often tell people that he is the greatest storyteller in news today, and I've told all of you that I wouldn't be standing here as your nominee for U.S. Senate if it weren't for the opportunity of a lifetime given to me by Chris Ruddy to become the host of Saturday Agenda at that inflection point when our nation appeared as if it was in peril. And now here we are, 20 days and counting, and the update is clear. Chuck Schumer is in trouble. He knows it. Anybody who's willing to tell you the truth knows it. Even the people in his own inner circle, when they go to the bar and think they're off the record, they'll tell their friends who are Republicans he's worried sick. The man has spent $2.5 million for a new ad buy after he just spent $3.5 million over the last 22 days. He's not doing it to stimulate the economy. He's doing it because he knows that Father Time is catching up to him, that the New Yorkers are awake, that we will no longer tolerate the tyranny of one-party rule, and that in this election, we are going to make sure that not only do we retire Chuck Schumer, not only do we fire Kathy Hochul, but we take back our state and we turn this nation around. So obviously, Chairman, he admonishedly, he told him not to come. If you show up here, I'll kick you out. He offered similar advice to me, but our race is a little bit different. You see, Chuck Schumer has been down in D.C. for 42 years. And so, for a long time, it appeared to some people as if he was a man of principle. And if not a man of principle, at least a man you could depend on to do what was right for his constituents. This is the man who invented the Schumer box, which made sure that the credit card companies didn't rip you off. This was a man who was the one who introduced the bill in Congress for religious freedom. My, how times have changed. Here comes the mandates for COVID. He does nothing. He says nothing. He allows the government to take your religious exemption and rip it up. He allows them to take the heroes we bang the pots and pans for and throw them on the unemployment line. He allows our children to attend schools that are crumbling and stands in the doorway like George Wallace saying, "You shall not pass," to every single family that wants to have the school choice we deserve. And now is the moment that we have to have individuals like yourself to carry the message that the old Chuck is dead. He's never coming back. And he will stay on the job as long as possible to destroy the American dream as we all know it to be. Now, obviously, some polls have been coming out. The results are quite encouraging. Turns out, we said we had to get 30% in New York City. There are some pollsters who think we're past 35 and closing in on 40. But you see, in our race, there's still those pockets of the state where word doesn't get around quite as fast, where the illusion and the grandeur of television sometimes speaks louder than the reality that's smacking you in your face. Right now, Charles Ellis Schumer, he's on his election year swindle. He takes the money that he gets from the people he does favors with that ends up in his campaign coffers, and he blankets the airways with revisionist history. Tells Central New York that I know that 1 million of our friends and neighbors have fled, but turns out $100 billion is coming to New York, and you just have to give me 6 more years to get the results. Shows up with the Publishers Clearinghouse check that represents our hard-working tax dollars, and then says that he is a solution to our problems, when in the reality he is the one that created them in the first place. And so I need all of you, those from the Wayne counties, those from all the counties across this state. We've got a car outside that's got about 200,000 palm cards in it. It's weighing down the axle of the vehicle. If you are from a county that is running low on palm cards, you cannot leave this building until you take them with you. Because we are going to get the word to every single person all around this state that common sense is coming back to America. That individuals who would like to teach your children about the mechanics of sex before they know how to actually spell the word at a time when they should know neither, have no business in the halls of power anymore. This is the moment when we get to go and tell the untold story of this state. The story that we have been telling from town to town, county to county. But we have Rochester, New York, that now has more murder per capita than Chicago, Illinois. A Syracuse, New York, that now has the highest level of child poverty in the country than any other major city. A New York City, a Buffalo, where shootings are up 90%, homicides up 30%, and the 3 most dangerous words ever uttered in the history of modern politics, defund the police, has let the streets run with the blood of the innocent, while Chuck Schumer dances in Brooklyn, oblivious to it all. So now we are in the final stretch. I need your help. I need you to take those palm cards in the car and make sure that every single home gets the message. Charles Ellis Schumer is on the ballot. And whether they're left of Bernie Sanders, be they right of Donald Trump, in this moment we are unified in our desire to have an America as good as its promise. To tell people concretely that this is a nation founded to escape tyranny of a king, that will never abide the tyranny of government, to codify our God-given individual rights. And if we do not stand here, we must recognize, as Reagan admonished us, that freedom is not passed down in the bloodline. We must fight for it generation to generation, and this is the fight of our lifetimes where we cannot lose. You know, there was a lot of angst, sorrow, joy, and trepidation baked into this event. We stand here to commemorate a giant who led this movement in the face of those who said it had no business in politics to begin with. Chairman Long understood what it meant to stand on principle, the courage of one's convictions. And year after year, election after election, there were those who suggested that we have to choose between principles and practicality. And we are at the moment when we should know clearer than ever that to sacrifice one for the other means that both shall perish, wither, and die. So here we are. I often remind people that Abraham Lincoln, he lost 7 elections. We rarely talk about it because he saved the Union. There was a man named Ronald Reagan. He came and said he wanted to make America great again. He ran not once, not twice, but 3 times to become the leader of this country. And we don't talk about it because we got a Reagan revolution. I say all this because I'm fortunate and humbled to be your nominee. But much of the work had already been done when you bestowed that honor upon me. But now we are here to finish the job. We don't choose the moments. They choose us. I didn't choose to say I wanted to have my own television show on Newsmax, but that's where the Lord wanted me at that particular point in time. I didn't choose to think that I would be the first person with melanin in their skin to be the nominee for U.S. Senate by either major party in the history of this state. But that is the honor you have given me. But I didn't do it to make history. I did it to save this country. I did it because I love this state. And so now we all have a decision to make. Where do you stand? What will you do? And what is the story you will tell your children and your grandchildren 5 years from now and 10 years from now when they ask you what you did at that critical moment, when the people who had power over this nation tried to change it into something it was never intended to be by embracing policies that have never worked in the history of the world? We've got a fentanyl crisis that is destroying this nation because they have an open sesame policy on the southern border. They don't care about what it does to every single one of us, bringing death and decay to urban and suburban and rural mothers alike. They called it the new Ellis Island. It's an island of despair and decay, but together we're going to end it. They don't care about the fact that last week we learned 70% of all the black children in New York City that sat for the math exam for the state failed it. We do. And together we're going to do something about it. They say they care about women's rights and yet ignore the fact that sexual assault is up nearly 300% over the last 18 months in New York City. Whether they recognize it or not, we are the last thing standing between the good and the evil that will destroy this state, that will cripple this nation, and will destroy the moral fiber that we have left. And so I want to yield here because we have many fine candidates here. Michael Henry, who's doing an outstanding job. Paul Rodriguez, who's doing an outstanding job. But this is the moment. Those fateful words, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I shall hear their cries from heaven, forgive their sins and heal their land. It is healing time in New York State. The Conservative Party is going to lead the way, but I need your help to do it. We've got to go out there and do the work. We've got to go out there and let people know that faith in godliness is coming back, that our rights are coming back, and that this is the year, by the grace of God, by the will of the people, we have a nation for the people, by the people, once again. God bless you all, and thank you so much.
I got it. It's right here. There's a big box of them out in the lobby. Okay, we've got some more people who want to come up and say hello, including the next Attorney General of the state of New York. Would you please welcome Michael Henry?
Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Chairman Kassar. Hopefully 3 weeks from today, not too long from this time at night, I'll be getting a concession call from Letitia James congratulating me on defeating her. In the middle of the summer, I think it was either late July or early August, I was at an event with her in Brooklyn, and one of the rabbis at the event walked up to her and said, "Your competition's here." And she said, "I don't have competition." And then, shortly after, they introduced Tom DiNapoli to the crowd, and the whole room gave a standing ovation. They then introduced Letitia James to the crowd, and the only 3 people in the whole room that clapped were her 3 staffers. So then I knew she not only had competition, she had a problem. Now, I'm running to become your next Attorney General because we all know that things are not okay. And we know how things have worsened under one-party control. We have a crime crisis, we have a corruption crisis, we have a cost of living crisis. We have an Attorney General in Letitia James who recently said, after seeing all the statistics and all the crimes every day, that she needs more data before she revisits any changes to cashless bail. But it's not funny, because more data means more victims. And one victim is one victim too many. And that is a despicable mindset for the chief law enforcement officer of the state to have. And if she wants data, I have data for her. In New York City, 36% rise in major crimes, 41% rise in hate crimes, 49.1% rise in transit crimes, 25-year high in subway murders. Go to neighboring Nassau County, you have a 34% rise in major crimes. Go to Rochester, you have a higher murder rate than the city of Chicago. Go to Buffalo, you have a 3-year increase in murders every year the last 3 years. But this should not be surprising, because when Letitia James ran for the city council, she couldn't even get nominated by the Democrat Party. She had to run on the Working Families Party line. And this election cycle, she proudly accepted that endorsement. And in their questionnaire, they said you cannot take police or correctional union support, nor could you revisit any changes to cashless bail. When I'm the Attorney General, I'm going to use the bully pulpit to push for the full repeal of cashless bail, because this is not working and it needs to be repealed. And they lied to the public that this was for non-violent first-time offenders. Some of the crimes that are eligible are not non-violent. You have arsons, you have robberies. If you use a weapon in the commission of a crime and you do not discharge it, you're eligible to be released on cashless bail. If they want to have something in place for first-time non-violent offenders, you make the legislature go back to the drawing board and write something up that works. I also support the full repeal of less is more. We just recently watched a woman in Howard Beach have her head stomped in by a parolee who was arrested twice in the days before that attack. When you are on parole, you are still completing your sentence. You are trying to reintegrate back into society. And if you can't obey the rules, you need to go back to jail until you can learn how to obey the rules. And we also need to amend and make changes to raise the age, because this has led to a rash of teenage shootings, and even though you're underage, if you're going to engage in crimes like an adult, you need to be held accountable. I'm also going to work in conjunction with local district attorneys to make sure that they have the resources they need. As I travel the state, especially in rural Republican states, I have district attorneys telling me that in their states where the roads are, in their counties where the roads are dark, there's a lot of drug trafficking. And in the past, when Andrew Cuomo, Eric Schneiderman, and all the other Democrat attorney generals in office, they worked jointly with the AG's office to take on the drug trafficking. Since Letitia James has been in office, she's cut off resources to the Republican counties. When you're the Attorney General of the state of New York, your job is to represent all the people of the state of New York, and not just the people that live in North Brooklyn and your comfort zone. Lastly, I'll introduce program bills to not only get crime under control, but my office is going to treat corruption like the crime that it is. Because when you raise your hand and you take an oath to represent the people of this state, and they trust you with that responsibility, you're not supposed to use those taxpayer dollars as a slush fund. And Kathy Hochul should not be running for re-election with all of us subsidizing her re-election campaign. And we're going to make an example out of those that think your taxpayer dollars are their personal expenses for their campaigns. I'm going to use the Public Integrity Bureau to investigate these matters. I am also going to work in conjunction with the Comptroller's Office to audit these government contracts and taxes. And I'm going to use the Attorney General's Office to audit all these not-for-profits that are raising millions of dollars and are clearly not providing any of the services that they claim they're supposed to be providing. And lastly, the Attorney General's Office oversees many different industries in this state. And I am going to bring people into these offices who are not social justice warriors. I'm going to have bureau chiefs and people running these bureaus that understand how to make an economy grow in this state, to streamline the bureaucracy, make the office responsive when people are calling, and to have coordination in place so people could get the licensing, the inspections, and everything they need so their businesses could thrive. Now, we have a tough election on November 8th, but we're going to win. And when we win, we're going to shock the nation, because Letitia James is the most political attorney general in the United States of America. And when I defeat her, and when we defeat her, we're going to send a message to the rest of the country. If you're a district attorney, if you're an attorney general, if you're a secretary of state, and you want to weaponize your office against political opponents, your days are numbered. Please go to Michael Henry 4AG. We could use all your support, and thank you all very much for entrusting me with being the conservative nominee.
And our next comptroller And boy, what an important and powerful position that is. You need someone in that position who has not only incredible intellect, but also incredible character. And we have such a candidate in Paul Rodriguez.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I feel quite honored and humbled to be with all of you tonight. It's amazing to think that there's only 3 weeks to wait till we make history here in the state of New York. And before I say anything about Controller, I simply want to take the opportunity to thank you. Thank you for the support you have shown me, not just with this race, but last year, race in the past. Thank you, Jerry Kassar. Thank you, Fran Vallamarone, wherever you are. Thank you, so many of you, some who are old friends, some who are new, who have supported me throughout this adventure. And thank you for everything that you've done for the whole statewide slate, for all the candidates that there in the state of New York, and for everything that you're going to do, whether you're asked to or not. So thank you for that. You may please give yourselves a round of applause for that. Now I have to admit, I'm running for Controller. It's not the sexiest office, and I'm a bit envious, quite envious of some of my ticket mates statewide. For example, when someone gets up here, or Congressman Selden gets up here and says, "Who's ready to fire Kathy Hochul?" Exactly. When Michael Henry says, "Who's ready to fire Tish James?" And when the preacher says, my beloved Joe Pinion, "Who's ready to fire Charles Ellis Schumer?" But mind you, someone in an introduction tried to say, "Oh, who's ready to fire Tom DiNapoli?" That kind of fell as flat as the way it's falling now. What is that? Because most people, in fact, a recent survey, I think it was Siena, showed that over 60% of New Yorkers have no idea who the Controller is, and much less what the Controller does. So I'll give you just a brief perspective of what the Controller does. 2 main functions. First, to provide oversight over any activity where state funding is utilized, including the $220 billion state budget. And second, to be the sole trustee, meaning the one person who guides and decides the direction of how the state's $270 billion, probably lower now, pension fund is run. So imagine one individual can exert influence over nearly $500 billion of the state's money. And yet, most people have no idea who the Controller is or what the Controller does. But there's a good reason also why that is. And let me talk about my opponent, Mr. Tom DiNapoli. He is the longest-serving career politician, the longest-serving elected official in the state of New York, spent 20 years in the Assembly, has been 15 years as Controller, and he was recently asked in an interview, what would you say is your greatest accomplishment as Controller? He smiled with that sort of affable smile that he has, and he said, well, you know, I've been there many years, and you know, I haven't really had to resign or thank God following the footsteps of my predecessor, Alan Hevesy, who went to jail. So maybe that sounds, oh, good, that's good. But think about this. This is the state of New York, and the greatest accomplishment that the Controller can put forth, how far has the bar been lowered? That the greatest accomplishment is that he is still in office after all these years. But, mind you, there's a reason nobody knows what he does or who he is. Because even though he's got a very good reputation for activism in terms of using the state's pension plan to push whatever personal politics he has, that same level of activism doesn't seem to transfer to shining a light on the corruption that seems to surround all of us, that all of us seem to see. But in his mind, well, you know, maybe the optics are bad. The fact that a $637 million no-bid contract was given for COVID testing to a firm that just magically happened to give $300,000 to the Kathy Hochul campaign that year doesn't look good. But you know what? I can't really prove quid pro quo. You know, I guess he's expecting a scroll coming down from the sky or an email that says, "Hey, Kathy Hochul, thank you for that no-bid contract, which, by the way, is overpriced. Here's that donation in return for that." That doesn't happen, ladies and gentlemen. And he knows that's not how it happens. And anyone who has any level of political awareness knows that's not how it happens. But that doesn't mean that you don't probe, you don't ask, you don't investigate. And this is what we're missing. He says that the reason people don't know much about the controller is because the controller's above the fray. They don't engage in politicking. That's one explanation. The other explanation is you're not doing your job. If you were looking and doing your job, looking after what's going on in the state and doing your job, perhaps the 15 years that you've been controller wouldn't coincide with 15 years of some of the worst corruption in state government. So just let me conclude by saying, we have a lot of work to do over the next 3 weeks. I appreciate everything you're doing. Do not let up. From now until November 8th, and frankly, till a few days after that, because you know there's going to be shenanigans, or something's going to go on, particularly when the Democrats are feeling cornered and they're feeling pressure. To this day, Tish James has not accepted to debate Michael Henry for Attorney General. I will be debating Tom DiNapoli tomorrow. Let's see how that goes. I'll probably be debating Errol Lewis more than Tom DiNapoli. But keep in mind, we need a change. What you do between now and November 8th, you need to talk to every Republican, conservative, liberal, socialist, what have you. You need to remind them what's at stake. You need to remind them that hundreds of thousands of people have already left the state of New York, and many have pretty much told you, if we don't have some tangible changes in state government, local government, after November 8th, I'm going to be looking to go somewhere else as well. But all of us who love this state, who want it to be a place where we can raise our families and really make a turnaround, it is up to us to go out there and remind people. Who were the people responsible for firing you if you didn't get vaccinated? Who would fine you on the street for not wearing a mask? Who would tell a business owner, well, you know, this guy at that corner in the dark, within 15 minutes of closing, whose mask was below his nose, that's a no-no. I'm going to need to fine you $5,000 for that and for every occurrence. The high taxes, the high crime, the high cost of living, the onerous regulations, all these things are driving New Yorkers away. And it's going to be up to us and all of us to work from now to November 8th to begin to turn that around. So thank you very much for your time, for your support, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Okay, I've been keeping careful track of the time. We had this beautiful room for 12 more minutes. There is still food. There's coffee over there. There's just enjoy. We've got this beautiful room. You don't have to walk out the door right now. If you'd like to have your picture taken, our photographer, Ron Glassman, would be happy to take group pictures. Just come on up by the podium. Everybody knows Ron. I was going to say wave Ron, but everybody knows Ron. I hope you enjoyed yourself this evening. I hope you'll be enjoying yourself on the morning of November 9th. I think that we all will be. But of course, it's up to us to get our friends, because we know what we're going to do, to get our friends to go and vote on November 8th. Thank you so much for attending this evening. Have a safe trip home. Talk to you in the morning.